Hey everybody, welcome to the August 2nd edition of the Carolina Weather Group podcast. I cannot believe it's August. I think the last time I hosted one of these shows when Scotty was out, it was like the first weekend. I couldn't believe it was like July. The world is continuing to spin and our months keep going by faster and faster, it seems. But we have a great show tonight. We're really excited about this one. It's the heart of summer thunderstorm season, and we have the perfect guy to talk about thunderstorms tonight with Dr. Patrick Marsh joining us from the Storm Prediction Center. We'll get to him in just 1 minute. We want to go around our round table here and welcome in some of our regular panel members. We'll head first to South Carolina, where Shay, we are now less than 3 weeks away from that big solar eclipse. Anything big going on in South Carolina?
Oh, I'll tell you what, we enjoyed some cool, drier air the last few days up until today. Things are kind of getting back to normal. Getting that east flowing off the ocean, that'll turn a little bit more southerly. And then we have another cold front that wants to come to the southeast and die over the weekend, as they usually do. But we're getting back more to a seasonal pattern. That was nice. This is about 3 days worth of northeast winds. We had a nice little wedge work down. Let's see, Monday and Tuesday, the winds came up fairly moderate. I mean, it was 20, 21 knots at times. So it really helped kind of cool down the air in the southeast. And I think some of the folks up in North Carolina, we'll get to Scotty. I think he just popped on. We'll talk about how cool it was up there. But nice little refreshing weather event for late July, early August. We also are dealing with some moisture from the Gulf. We had Tropical Storm Emily that formed yesterday morning and came ashore of Florida very quickly. Well, we can talk about that in a little while too. I want to make sure we get to the other regions. But that Gulf moisture will continue to feed up into the southeast region next few days with some warm weather and maybe some moderate southerly winds mixed in there too. If we get any sunshine for sea breezes, sea surface temperatures are in the low 80s now. They dropped about 3 or 4 degrees since all of the clouding and the rain in the northeast wedge the last 3 days as well with that cooler air. So back to you, Ricky.
All righty, and I think we do have Scotty joining us now from the coast tonight instead of the mountains. He has evacuated to the coast right when a tropical storm forms in the Gulf of Mexico. Any relation there, Scotty?
No, not really. I hope you guys can hear me. Can you?
We got you good.
All right, good. Yeah, no, planned this vacation a few months ago, and how about Emily forming? Today, though, I don't know about Shay down in Charleston. I was out at the ocean. Noticed the ocean was a little kicked up, but besides that, a few clouds. It wasn't too bad. I'm shocked here. It's been kind of chilly at night here along the North Carolina coast. We've been into the low to mid 60s a few mornings ago, so it's not too bad though. The heat and humidity returns tomorrow, and it looks like it's going to stick around for a while.
Luckily, it looks like you have power where you're at. Some folks in Ocracoke and Hatter are still dealing with power outages.
Yeah. In fact, that's where I was supposed to be closer up to the coast, and had to kind of reevaluate things, and we settled here in Holden Beach, about 30 miles north of Myrtle Beach. So it's been a good weekend and a good beach weekend. I mean, no rain or anything, so we're very thankful for that.
Scotty, do you know what the cause was for the blackout up there?
From what I understand, they're constructing a new bridge, and somehow the construction crews cut all 3 of the cable supplies to the Outer Banks. So that is what the cause was, from what I've understood, and it looks like it's going to be at least another week and a half to 2 weeks before they get power out there. And I have heard that there's some of the businesses out there planning on suing the company. So it's going to be a nasty battle, I think, in court once all is said and done.
Yeah, they had to evacuate tens of thousands of tourists from that area. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your stay up there. I'm sure you're doing fine where you are.
I'm telling you, Shay, I hate that northeast wedge came in, because you're right. The ocean temperatures are a little bit cooler than I expected.
Yeah, they dropped, I think, about mid to upper 70s where they were low 80s there. The temperature drops rather quickly along the coastal shelf of North Carolina, much faster than it does for South Carolina, just because of the land and the cool water upwelling from those offshore winds along those capes. So, yeah, that happens quick, but it'll rebound on these southerly winds. You'll see it come back up again next few days.
Definitely looking forward to it. I'm going to try to go find my computer cord because my battery may be dead. So I'll be back in just a minute.
I don't know if you guys saw a tweet. I think I retweeted it, but some guy, if you've ever been to the Outer Banks, there's always banner tow planes that go by, and some guy bought a banner tow plane and he put "call before you dig" on it. Love the Holden family, and flew it over the Bonner Bridge area. So It just goes to show, call before you dig. All right, let's go to Charlotte, where they probably call before they dig. James, what's up in your neck of the woods? And James is quiet. There we go. Yep. All righty, very good. And our last panel member tonight, we're going to jump over to the Memphis area. And Eric, welcome.
Hey, good evening, Ricky. Excuse me. I'm fighting a little bit of a late summer cold as well. So do the best I can to get through here tonight. And it might be just the changes in weather that's doing it over here. We had quite hot and humid for a few weeks and then got a nice front through here on Friday. Put down a pretty good amount of rain for everybody, generally an inch or so across the area, which was well needed and appreciated. And the better part of that was that the front moved all the way through down to the Gulf Coast. And of course, that eventually had a low form along that became Emily. But up here in Memphis, dropped the dew points down. We actually hit the upper 50s for brief periods over the weekend. It was so nice. I decided to get out and do some of the work outside that I've been putting off this summer, and ended up with a wasp sting out of it. So, you know, you can't ever have everything you want when that's going on. But we're rebounding now as we do in the summertime. It doesn't usually stay that nice for very long. And dew points jumped back up yesterday. We got a few spotty showers back around, and looking forward to another front this Friday that probably won't have quite the effects of the one last Friday, but maybe we'll get a day of decent weather out of it this weekend. So looking not too bad overall, pretty much below normal temperatures on average here right now. So we'll take it.
Yeah, battling wasps is my summertime tradition. When they come to my balcony, they die. I'm not a fan of wasps at all. All right, let's introduce our guest tonight. Dr. Patrick Marsh is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. We are really excited to have him tonight, and thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule. And you were telling us some staffing issues. I think many people still know the SPC and a busy life, so we really thank you for joining us tonight, Patrick.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to do it.
So let's kind of talk a little bit and kind of set the stage for what the SPC's number one role is. Where does the SPC kind of fall in the whole Weather Service plethora of offices?
Okay, so if you think of the Weather Service as a hierarchical flow chart type sort of thing, so you have National Weather Service headquarters, and then you kind of have I'm simplifying this, but you'd have two forks from there, where you have the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, NCEP, and the Storm Prediction Center is one of the national centers. And so they're in the NCEP side of the chart. On the other side, you would then have the National Weather Service, the region. So you'd have Eastern region, Southern region, Central region, Western, Pacific, and Alaska. So you'd have the regions, and then the local forecast offices fall under those. So in the hierarchy, we're all part of the same weather service, but we're on a different fork of the hierarchical branch within the national centers. So some of our sister centers are the Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, the Aviation Weather Center, the Weather Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center. So if it basically has center in the title, you're under NCEP, the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. And if you don't, then you're probably a forecast office, a CWSU, or a river forecast center, and you're under the regions and under the local forecast office side of the hierarchy.
Something I think is really interesting about the SPC, you know, a lot of weather service offices have a backup. That's another weather service office. But if you guys go down, it's not another weather service office that backs you up, right?
No, our short-term backup. So if we have to go into backup for less than 24 hours, our short-term backup is actually Scott Air Force Base, part of the Operational Weather Squadron with the 555th Air Force Weather Wing, Air Weather Wing. I forget the exact terminology, but we're actually backed up by the Department of Defense. So that we are unique in that situation. If we ever had to go into long-term backup, our long-term backup is actually Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska.
And let's say, is that something you guys test out on a regular basis? Is something Scott or Offutt test regularly?
So with Scott, we do where we'll have scheduled. I think it's like once a quarter. We'll have a scheduled exercise where for the day we will turn over all operational products to them, and they will issue the products that they issue. One of the things that happens if we do end up going into backup is not all of our current product suites continue. For example, if you look at the convective outlooks, you have the categories, the slight, moderate, highs, and then you have the probabilities of the hazards. The probabilities are not issued if we go to backup. So we test out okay, so they issue the categories, and then if we come back online and we can we still update the probabilities? And so when we do our testing, they'll do the categories, and then we'll put the probabilities in ourselves. And then if we're in backup mode for testing and a watch needs to be issued, it will actually originate from Offutt Air Force Base, or excuse me, from Scott Air Force Base. So we'll actually test the watch process. And I think if I've gone back and looked through the database, maybe 1 or 2 watches a year, on average over the last decade, have come from our backups. So that's our short term. If we go to long term, if we're going to be down for more than 24 hours, we actually send 2 forecasters to Offutt, and we will resume normal operations as quickly as possible. But we will be doing it from their location, not from our location. So if the National Weather Center was hit by a tornado and we would be offline for a couple of weeks or a month, we would initially send a small group of forecasters up there, and then we would start the process of relocating enough of the staff to maintain operations for the duration of our outage. So that's kind of how our backup works. Each national center has their own kind of procedures. In fact, we actually are part of the backup for the Weather Prediction Center. We would take over some of their precipitation forecast responsibilities.
Okay. And so you guys are tasked with forecasting for the lower 48, but not Alaska and Hawaii. Why was that decision made many years ago?
I am probably not the best one to answer that, actually. That's a good question. I'm not sure the history there. I know that just in the grand scheme of things, one possibility, and I'm just speculating here, is it would be a lot of work in bodies at the Storm Prediction Center to maintain situational awareness for Alaska and Hawaii for not a whole lot of severe. And so it probably made more sense financially and logistically to let those 2 areas maintain the severe natures there. I do know about once or twice a year, I think I see a severe thunderstorm watch for Hawaii. I'm not aware of there ever being one in Alaska, but I'm not going to go out and say that it's never happened. But I'm not aware of one happening.
I have a friend who works at the Honolulu office, and I see his tweets every once in a while in the days leading up to it, or his Facebook posts in the days leading up to it, like, ooh, I think tomorrow's a watch day. And it's a big deal for them to actually watch.
Well, I think it's fascinating that it's entirely possible, or they get thunderstorms and maybe even severe thunderstorms down at the low levels, down at the beach level. But up on top of some of those mountains, it's a blizzard. So I mean, you've got blizzard warnings and severe thunderstorm watches maybe at the same time. To me, that's just that's awesome.
And we have seen that before. I think it was Nebraska or parts of Oklahoma or Kansas, where the weather seems to go crazy every single year in western portions of the states.
I have seen severe thunderstorm warnings and blizzard warnings and blizzard watches, but usually it's on the leading edge of a strong storm system. It's not the same kind of thunderstorm doing both. But I guess if you think about it, if you got high enough into that thunderstorm, you'd get the blizzard part.
Yeah. When you guys are issuing these probabilistic forecasts and the categorical forecasts each day, how long does it take to kind of put those together and then get the products disseminated?
It's a really good question. Every forecaster is different, and every forecast is different. I know for me, when I'm working on an outlook, if I'm if I'm afforded the luxury of having time, I can do it. So like when I was on mid shifts this past weekend, midnight shifts for the Storm Prediction Center go from midnight to 8 a.m. And so I was working on the midnight shift, and I was going to do the day one that goes out at 13Z, so 7 a.m. Central Time. And I started that one, 8 a.m. Central Time. I started that one about 5 in the morning. Now, if you come in on a day shift during the summertime, the day shift starts at 8 a.m. and the convective outlook has to be out by 11:30 a.m. So by the time you get in, get ready, get spun up, you probably spent 30 minutes or an hour, so you don't have 3 hours. And when we go to standard time, you come in at 8 a.m. and the outlook is due at 10:30 a.m. So you lose another hour there. So in that regards, what we kind of, a lot of us take the pencils down approach. You start working on the outlook, you start working on putting things together, you start writing the discussion. And when it's time to hit send on the button, you put your pencils down and you hit send on the outlook. And so well, at the Storm Prediction Center, we have this philosophy of what's known as the continuous weather watch. So even though we have some discrete products with the outlooks, we are continuously evaluating and tweaking those. And sometimes you may see us make an amendment to a forecast at an off hour. I know recently we had an event in northern Kansas and Missouri where a nocturnal storms developed and became this pretty intense bow that moved through the Kansas City metro area. And we initially had a marginal risk, and we did an amendment at an off time and upgraded to slight risk. Coincident, I think, with a severe thunderstorm watch going out. And just talking to some of the power companies in the area, it sounds like that was probably one of their biggest, most widespread wind events in recent times. And so that's a time where the fact that we're continuously watching and we're continuously updating, we saw that the forecast was the atmosphere was changing from what we initially thought, and so we did an unscheduled update to account for it. So 2 to 3 hours, 1 to 3 hours dedicated focus. This is all I'm doing, but we're continuously monitoring and updating that process. And we're having discussions amongst all of us. So we tend to have 3 to 5 people on shift at a time. And even though there may be one person's name or 2 people's name on the outlook, all of us are providing input into that outlook process. So if you add up all the time, many man hours and many experience hours that go into it. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of work. It's a unique challenge, and I encourage any weather weenies out there. If you're a student, send me an email. Send the Storm Prediction Center an email, and especially if you're a student, we might be able to arrange a job shadow, and you can experience it firsthand.
And Dr. Marsh, I've got the actual product. I'm going to share screen. This is the page that we would go to first. It's spc.noaa.gov, and I'm going to present this to everyone and just sort of give us a brief walkthrough of what to look for here. If I'm a viewer that doesn't know a whole lot about weather, but I want to know what the convective pattern is going to be for an area I'm going to for a trip, or just for my area alone, what am I looking for here?
Okay, that's a good question, and thanks for pulling it up. So if you look at, so one of the things that we're trying to work really hard about is we want consistency of message across platforms and consistency of message across colors and things like that. So if you come to our storm, if you come to the Storm Prediction Center homepage, one of the first things you'll notice is the colored banner at the top of the page. In this case, it says a slight risk of severe thunderstorms is forecast today. The color of the banner will correspond to the highest, the color of the highest outlook category over the next 3 days. So today we have a slight risk out today. And so the banner is focusing on the slight risk for today. If we had a moderate or a high risk out for tomorrow, the colors would reflect the moderate or high risk, and the banner would say that that's what we're forecasting for tomorrow. And then we'd also have a blurb saying today the risk is as X, Y, or Z. So the fact that the next 3 days, I think we have slight risks out. The yellow colors is consistent across all 3 of those days. And so what you can do is if you click on the right side, we have the flashing red watches and MDs banners and the all products tab. What we do is our products are listed there in order of most recent issuance. So what you would find is the most recently issued product would be at the top, and so you can kind of see the the time nature of our products being issued. And so as you showed, if you click on one of these products, one of those little banners, it'll actually take you to that product so that you can see. In this case, a severe thunderstorm watch was issued earlier this afternoon for parts of northeast Colorado and northwest Kansas and western Nebraska. And so it's really fun to watch that in the evening when we do our extended convective outlooks. You'll see a lot of new products, and the new convective outlooks show up sometimes in rapid succession on our homepage. If you click on, in addition to being able to click on the stuff on the right, we have the little banners across the top of the image where it says Overview, Convective Outlook, Watches, MD, Storm Reports, Mesoanalysis, Fire Hazards. You could, if you mouse over those, you'll see the image corresponding to those products. And if you click on those labels, it will take you to that portion of our website. So if you clicked on watches, it would take you to our watch page where you can then dive down and get to the Severe Thunderstorm watch. Additionally, on our homepage, at the bottom of the graphic that's up front and center, we have this matrix for severe and fire, where it shows the day and the risk, the maximum risk category of the various forecasts. So you can see we have a slight risk for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we have no areas in the extended. For fire, we did not have a critical today. We're not forecasting a critical for Thursday, and we have no critical areas delineated Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday or Wednesday. In addition to just that graphical and pictorial display, you can click on any of those hazard matrix entries, and it will take you to that forecast. So you can see, if you're interested in seeing what's happening fire weather on Friday, you can click on Friday. If you want to see the severe weather forecast for Sunday, you can click on Sunday, and it'll take you to that product as well. We try to have as many different entry points to the forecast and many different ways of getting the information that you are interested in, so that you can see it in the format you like. If you'd like to see a table, you have a table. If you're big on pictures, you've got pictures. And if you like iconography and colors, we try to do that as well. And then if you think about it below the fold or below the scroll, we have some useful information that people might be interested in. And at the very bottom of the page, we have our Facebook feed on the left and our Twitter feed on the right. So that if you're not interested in being on any of those social media platforms, but you want to see what we're saying, you can come to our webpage and you can get that information as well. So that's kind of the SBC webpage.
Dr. Marsh, as I hear you walk through that, I hear a little bit of user experience testing going on, but I also imagine a lot of this has to do with social science that also relates back to your products. Is that all sorts of things that get taken into consideration on a daily basis?
Yes. So one of the things that we have on our webpage that we don't have links to are what we call the social media graphics that I created a few years ago. And it's one of those, I can either give someone the URL or I can pull it up and
I can pull one
share
up.
the screen that way. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
These are for like the CWAs and FEMA areas and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, go right ahead. I'll capture and present it.
All right. Give me just a second here. Where was that slight risk for today? Was up Colorado?
Actually, I'm going to pull something up.
Sure.
Top secret links in the world of Dr. Patrick Marsh.
Well, I've been playing around with stuff, and so let me share.
We want to see the brand new stuff.
Yeah.
Debut it here.
So share. So you should be able to see it now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So I've got this. It's the URL is slightly different. I've got a Sweetie one, and we don't link to these because they're kind of development and can move. I also have the Sweetie 2, and Sweetie stands for Severe Weather Outlook Day 2, and then there's also a Sweetie 3. But what's nice about this is it's tied into the state, so you can see the outlook. So for the Day 3, we see that there's slight risk in New England. I can click on a state, and then it will take me into the state that way, so I can get an overview and then dive in. But to go back to the question at hand, you asked about the social science and working to how do we decide on what we're doing. Everything on this graphic went through probably 6 months to a year worth of discussion amongst meteorologists and social scientists every week, just trial and error on how to best present this. For example, when I first created it, I think 0 to 5, so to speak. So I ordered the legend from thunder on top to high on the bottom, and social scientists universally said that's the wrong way to convey information. You want the most important on top. So we flipped the ordering so that high was on top and thunder was on the bottom. Consistency in colors. How do we highlight the text, and how do we highlight the interstates, and how it's one of the big complaints that we get is, hey, severe weather doesn't stop at the end of a state boundary or a geopolitical boundary. Why do you only show me the state of Pennsylvania? So then how much of the surrounding area do we need to include? How do we convey what we're looking at in terms of the time so you know whether or not it's valid? All of this was discussed, and I mean, just to create these graphics, it was easily a year's worth of work with weekly 1 to 2 hour meetings discussing not always this, but a lot of times a good portion of our discussions were focused on how to best create these graphics. So that's just one example of our work with social scientists to try to convey the best product forward. And then we have other things. One of the things we've been hearing about is iconography. We need to do more with iconography to demonstrate what we're trying to say pictorially. And so we've worked on a prototype new watch page where we have some icons and pictures to help convey the threat, not only in numbers but also in relative sense. Not sure when that will or if that will ever see the light of day, because we do a lot of development, and sometimes things work out and sometimes things don't. So
what are some of the other, I believe you mentioned NWA a few years ago, some more frequent day 1 outlooks and day 2 outlooks? Are those in the pipeline?
Yes. So as part of the more frequent day 1 outlooks, we probably won't be moving towards updating the day 1 more frequently in the sense of the full period. And when I mean full period, it basically means from the time the product is issued until 12Z the next day. We will probably move towards more short-term forecasts where we will do probabilistic forecasts of the hazards, but for over the next 4 hours, and we may do that hourly, 2 hourly, 4 hourly. It's still being worked out, but that is in the works. We did that a few years ago. I think 2 years ago, we did a very cursory test. Last year, we did a test over a couple week, like a 6-week period, and we shared some of those forecasts internally to the Weather Service. Unfortunately, this year, for a variety of reasons, we were unable to continue the testing. But I know that most people I talk to at SBC are wanting to get back to that, and so I wouldn't be surprised if some flavor of that it appears in the next year or so. We've also been discussing, one of the things that we hear about is updating the day 3 forecast. I suspect in the next year or so that will become a reality. I'm just guessing at this point. I don't. Nothing is set in stone, but I know that there's a lot of discussion about that, and it's basically we're at the point of how do we do it? What needs to happen? How do our staffing levels and our product suite need to align to allow us to do that? These are things that we are discussing, and if I had to make a guess, I would guess that they would probably become reality in the next year or so.
When you guys do an upgrade like this, is it actually a software change that has to take place, or is there something in AWIPS that has to change, or Genpact that you guys use?
Okay, so I'll answer some of that question, but in different orders. First, I'll say that the Storm Prediction Center does not use AWIPS for our product generation and data displays. We use something that's called NAWIPS or National AWIPS. It was largely based on the graphical user interfaces to the Genpact programs, for those of you who are familiar with Genpact. So that's primarily what we use. We draw our forecasts and lines and discussion, and not our discussions, but all the graphical parts of our forecasts are generated in there. And then we have basically it's a web page text-based editor where we type in the text portions of our forecasts, and then we have some scripts that combine both the Genpact and the graphics and the text into the formats that then get disseminated out to the public. So if we were going to do a day 3 update, for example, there would have to be some software changes, because currently right now it's coded to only allow the day 3 forecast at one time. So we'd have to put in some logic to handle being able to issue it at a separate time. If we do short-term outlooks, we have to do something similar, where we have to allow for the time period to not end at 12Z. I think a lot of that may have already been worked on by to accommodate some of the testing that we've been doing. But yes, a lot of times it's both software updates, AWIP or NAWIPS. Well, actually, we can't update NAWIPS. Actually, the Storm Prediction Center is trying to move to the AWIPS platform to be consistent with the rest of the local forecast offices. Currently, a lot of the national centers still use the NAWIPS. We haven't fully moved to AWIPS. If we were to move to AWIPS, because we are not on AWIPS, there's kind of a software freeze. A lot of the focus is on not upgrading new capabilities into NAWIPS. It's on let's get AWIPS functional for the national center so that we can all be on a common operating picture. Or a common operating system. So there's a lot of merits there. Unfortunately, it means that some of the things that we might want to do, we have to wait until this transition is complete.
So, Patrick, besides the product updates, as far as new things that might be coming, besides just updating products more frequently, are there other things that are being kind of tested in the background that are being given some consideration, as far as whether it's new products or just different ways of displaying the products that you're already doing, or what kind of things can we expect, say, over the next year or two, even if it's experimental, I guess?
So we're always doing new things. One of the things that has been on my plate now for about 13 months, I just cannot seem to find the time to finish it, is right now, if you look at our convective outlooks and you look at our lines, they're not closed. They're just kind of lines drawn from Mexico to Canada or something like that. They're not necessarily closed polygons. And so if you want to do any kind of GIS work, color fills, things like that, you really can't. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to create GIS products of our forecasts that are closed and smoothed so that people can see the raw lines in a consistent manner. That's something that I need that will probably come to fruition hopefully this fall. Another big one is what happens when you are on the one side of a moderate line and somebody else, your neighbor on the other side of town, is on the other side. So some person isn't one. So like on east side of Oklahoma City, I'm in a moderate, but the west side of Oklahoma City is in an enhanced. is the threat really that much different across the Oklahoma City metro? In reality, it's not. Our forecasts are governed by, we take the probabilities and we map them into a categorical space. So if you think in terms of tornado, you could have a 15% tornado risk highlighted for western Oklahoma, and the 30% line goes right down I-35. So eastern Oklahoma City's to the right of the 30 line, so they've got a higher than 30% chance. Does that mean that western Oklahoma City has half the tornado risk as eastern Oklahoma City? No. In reality, our probabilities have a continuous nature to them. If I'm on one side of the line, it may be 31%, and if I'm on the other side of the line, it may be 29%. So we're working on trying to figure out how can we communicate that, and how can we visually depict this continuous nature of the threat so that people don't say, oh, I'm outside the line, my risk is much lower than the other person, when for all practical purposes your risk is the same. And this has really become a problem with GIS, is people can take our forecast and zoom right down to the street level and say, hey, Bob's house across the street, he's got a high risk, but I only have a moderate here. And so how do we convey the fact that no, the threat is actually a continuum, and okay, Bob may have a very, very minute higher probability, but for all practical purposes, that street should have the same probability of an event. So how do we communicate that? And how do we develop the continuous probabilities? Those are things that we are working on, and sometime in the next few years, I would expect to see something come of that, especially as the Weather Service embraces more of this warn-on forecast and facets, the forecasting continuum of environmental threats, which are basically continuous probabilities and continuous forecasts. As we move towards that, SPC will have to get our forecast in that manner. And in fact, we've been working on this for long enough that we're much longer than facets has been around. It's a really, really hard problem.
Well, and you're no stranger to this either, but obviously out here on the communication side of that, when we have lines that are delineate an in and an out and that kind of thing, cutting through areas of coverage and so forth, we're trying to explain to people, look, just because you're just left of that line doesn't mean that you're out of the risk zone. And,
of course,
it's a challenge. Definitely is a challenge.
I mean, if you think about it, the Storm Prediction Center's history, our products and discussions were geared towards other meteorologists within the Weather Service, and then eventually the private sector. It's only been in the last, let's say, 1 to 2 decades that it's really been consumed by the public at large. And so in that regards, we developed a strategy and a lexicon and used terminology that were all towards meteorologists. And now we have to figure out, okay, we got to step back and figure out how to communicate all of this with a non-meteorological community. And it's certainly a challenge, and but it's one that we appreciate and we like, and we like. Honestly, I enjoy trying to solve these problems.
I have a question that I'd love to ask all the individuals that work for NOAA and National Weather Service. Are you able to use the new GOES 16 data to your advantage? And would you be using that for verification, especially with the new lightning mapper coming out?
So the answer to your question, the first part of the question is yes. We use it whenever we have it available. It's still, I believe, in testing phase or some portion of the testing phase. So there are days where we don't have it available because it's doing testing of full scans or dissemination or all this other stuff. But when it's not in active testing, the field offices and the National Weather Service can put in requests, and we do use that data. There are procedures in place to request mesosectors, the 1 minute update sectors, and for the most part, as long as the satellite is free for use, so to speak, those requests are honored within the hierarchy of the threats for the day. So we are using it and we're using it in an experimental manner in the sense that we're not guaranteed for it to be there. But when it is there, we certainly take advantage of it. When the Lightning Mapper comes online, it will certainly be interesting to see how we can use it. We have people who are working towards the best ways for us to use it. There's a lot of potential use cases there. I can think of a lot, especially with fire weather, knowing that there was lightning in regions where you might not have ground-based sensors. That might help what's known as the initial attack, get the firefighters on it before the fire gets out of control. I could see a lot of uses there. And I'm sure there will be additional uses for verification. With the severe weather season ongoing, I have not spent a whole lot of time thinking about what I could do with, or what I could do with it. I'm sure that there are other people much smarter than I that are licking their chops to get ready to go with it.
Right. Speaking of licking chops, one of the products I love to use, this is more for the weather geeks out there, is the SPC analysis, mesoanalysis. So I'm going to pull this up on the screen. We call this mesoanalysis for short, but you can see here there is a lot of parameters in this product. There's a lot of information here that is very useful on a day-to-day basis. We won't get into all the science of it because it's extensive, but we do know that there's some new products or some new parameters in there. I think the dendritic growth layer depth was introduced maybe last year or maybe the year before. Some of these are newer. Can you let us know if there's anything else coming down the pipeline that can be useful?
Sure. In a lot of ways, I'm actually one of the primary maintainers of the code that generates these fields. I'm not the one who generates the graphics for the web page, but our mesoanalysis generation code, I'm the one that maintains it. If it goes down, you rest assured I'm getting a phone call from an SPC forecaster at 3 a.m. if need be. And so Rich Thompson is one of the big drivers of coming up with new fields to look at. And so what the process is, he'll develop the code and we'll evaluate it in Sharp. And once we think that we got the logic working out right, and there appears to be some utility, we'll then move it over into the mesoanalysis generation code. And then Matt Mosier, John Hart, and some of the others will work to get it onto the web page. At present, there's not a whole lot that we're expecting to come down the pipeline because we just put in earlier before the severe weather season, we put in some of these new fields such as the max lapse rate. Some of the others, the dendritic growth zone and relative humidity in the dendritic growth, and a lot of those fields, we had them on the web page last winter, but it turns out that there were some bugs in that, and that Rich and I spent a good portion of the winter and early spring trying to debug it and figure out what was wrong. And we've got those bugs worked out. So we did a lot of that. And then once we got into this peak severe weather season, a lot of the development has to be halted as it's all hands on deck to get through the peak severe weather season. As we go into the later August and September, that's when Rich and I will probably start working on what do we want to add, what do we need to, what can we do. So if you ask me that question in maybe 2 more months, I might have an answer for you. Other than we're still we don't have anything at the present coming down, but I know that once we get to a point where we can think clearly, there will be things to come.
Well, we appreciate everything you guys put into that product. That's extremely useful.
Yeah, well, I know along those lines, I know going down into the future, we would like to eventually start disseminating that out, the raw grids out publicly. That's probably still maybe a couple years down the road because this is all done in Genpack, and we have to work with the WMO to get WMO GRIB IDs and GRIB headers and convert our code to create GRIB files. But I would not be surprised if in the next few years you might be able to download it off Nomads or some other dissemination platform.
Kind of staying on the same, since we're talking about the website again here, one of the pages that is kind of buried in there. But if you know about it, you find you use it quite a bit, is one I think that you've inherited from your predecessor, and that's the WCM page. Talk a little bit about the information that's on there and kind of what the purpose of that page is. And I'll be happy to share it here while you're talking.
Okay, I actually just pulled it up myself. So the WCM page has a long history. I think it actually goes back to the WCM before Greg Carbon, which is Dan McCarthy. I think he created it, and it was basically a way for SPC to provide information and have a kind of a clearinghouse where we could put things that we wanted to share somewhat with media, other weather service people. Greg kind of took it in a whole much bigger direction when he was here and started creating more maps and stuff. One of the things that my understanding of the rules are is if a weather service forecast office or national center, or if a weather service organization posts something on Twitter, it must also be available on your website. So if we were to create a graphic of all the tornado locations for 2016, and we wanted to post that on Facebook or Twitter or any other social media platform, we must also have it on our website so that someone who's not on social media doesn't have to have an account on a private company's platform to view it. And so with Greg, a lot of the stuff that we would put on social media found its home on the WCM page, and it became this kind of outreach blog, or not even blog, it's this outreach page where we would post the new things that we were working on, and a lot of it was done by Greg, and he maintained it, but other forecasters would sometimes send Greg things and say, hey, can you put this on the webpage for us? I have not done a whole lot with it because I've been still trying to spin up in the job, and also with our staffing shortages, I've been working a lot of forecast shifts. But at the very bottom of the warning coordination page is probably one of the most frequently asked for things that we have, and that is our severe weather database files, where we have CSV files of all severe weather reports. Tornadoes go back to 1950, and hail and wind go back to 1955. And so you can download these and see all the information. I also create GIS shapefile versions of it, and so there's a link to that on the at the very bottom of the page, where you can just grab that file, drop it into any GIS or shapefile viewing system, and then interrogate and visualize all the tornado paths through the United States. And so that's something that's housed on the WCM page. Now, going forward, one of the things that I would like to do, and I'm hopeful that I will have enough time to do it this fall, is I want to kind of retire the WCM page, because a lot of times you could put something on here and then it will disappear. It's not necessarily semi-permanent. I'd like to retire the WCM page and try to move towards some sort of media or outreach type blog, where things are kind of like permalinked, and so we could post something and refer back to something, and media and the public knows that it's going to be there. It would still be the same concept, but it would just be a reinvention of the WCM page, a more modern, friendlier to use version of the WCM page. So it's a long way of saying it's an outreach page where as we come up with new things that we think that people might be interested in, this is kind of our place to put it and share it, in addition to social media.
Patrick, I have two final questions here as we get close to 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 Central. When you guys issue a watch, what is the definition of a watch that verified?
It's a really, really good question. Let's see. I'm going to see. I know we have it on our web page. So if you go to our web page, and I'll pull it up, and then I will share my screen. Okay. So, for example, let's take a look at the current watch. as it loads. So we have the watch that goes out, and the watch, if you, I think if I have to go back, if I go to the watch main page, I'm trying to find, we have it actually written out. Maybe it's the about the SBC.
That was a really good question. You got him stumped.
Yeah. So I don't know I don't know off the top of my head, or I'm drawing a blank on the specifics. I think it's like 2 reports, and we have lead time goals that we shoot for. And I know that the text is on I think it's the SBC FAQ. If you look on watch questions, what is the sphere? You can read through this, and it'll talk about what we're looking for when we issue a watch. And so subjectively, those are the criteria we're trying to meet. But we're moving towards, and we try to think probabilistically. And so we issue these probabilistic watches, our watches have probabilities tied to them. I'm sorry, that's a better way of saying that. And so if you if you mouse over the probability tab, you can see, so probability of 2 or more tornadoes, well, we have 10% probability of 1 or more strong tornadoes. For this watch, we have less than 2%. And so the probability of 6 or more combined reports, 70%. So ideally, as we move forward, this is how we want to verify our watches. But it's not as simple as just saying, oh, you had a 70% chance of 6 or more combined hail or wind events. You had 10 reports, so it verified. Well, if you think about it, if I issue a really big watch, it's easier to get 6 or more reports, or 10 wind reports, or something like that. So you ultimately want to try to normalize the watch to a certain area. So like maybe 10 reports in a 10,000 square mile area, or something like that. So we're very like within the last year or so, we've begun discussions on how do we begin to quantify the probabilistic nature of the hazards in a way that's statistically reliable and meaningful. And so this notion of how do we prevent someone from just issuing a watch for the entire country and saying, okay, I did my job, that's going to verify. How do we reward people who do smaller watches, so that if you issue a really small watch, you don't want to verify. Sorry, if you issue a really small watch, it's going to be harder to get 10 reports. So how do we score that? So that's a real big stalling, rambling answer. Where I try to remember the actual number associated with the verification of the watch. Man, I know what I'm going to be doing as soon as we're off the podcast, is I'm going to be reading up on that. That's kind of embarrassing.
Well, send us a tweet if you find it, and we'll be glad to retweet it and then get it out there.
Will do. And oh wow, stop showing.
All right, last question. Since we are in the Carolinas, is there a difference in having to forecast convective weather in the Southeast versus in the Plains versus other regions across the United States?
So I'm going to give you a yes and no answer, and it's going to sound kind of like a cop-out, but here's why. The atmosphere is the atmosphere. Physics are physics. Storm structure and the physics of thunderstorms are the same in the Southeast, in the Plains, in the Northeast, everywhere. What is different are storm modes and the societal exposure to the various hazards. So when you start, you can have supercells galore in the western Nebraska Panhandle and never hit a town. If I have 1 or 2 supercells going across Alabama, it doesn't take very long before I've hit 3 or 4 towns. So the meteorology is the same, but the societal impacts are considerably different. And so when you start thinking about Okay, so I've got the potential for I'm going to have a squall line move through the southeast. Well, does that? Am I going to have the report? If I'm going to have a map that's full of blue dots, as we call it, or a bunch of wind reports tomorrow? Whereas if I took the same thing and moved it across Oklahoma, I may have one or two. So it's the same meteorological phenomenon, but if I verify based on the number of reports exclusively, it's a marginal or maybe a slight risk in the plains, but it's a high risk in the southeast. And it's just because of the number of people there to report things. So forecasting, just the meteorology is the same, but we don't live in a vacuum, and it's this notion of how do we create a forecast that accurately conveys the threat, but also how do we create a forecast that is going to appear to be to appear to be correct, because it's one of those, you have a slight risk in Alabama and you have like 400 reports. Well, there's a lot more trees to fall. Maybe they weren't all 60-mile-per-hour winds. There's a lot of caveats there, and so the real challenge becomes a communications one. And one of the things that we ask our forecasters to do is forecast the meteorology. Don't worry necessarily about if you think that the meteorology supports a certain forecast, and you don't think you're going to get 60-mile-per-hour winds widespread, then maybe you don't go enhanced or moderate or something. You keep it as a slight. But then it becomes a challenge for me is how do we then convey that, well, SPC is not asleep at the wheel. Meteorologically speaking, a lot of those trees down could have fallen down at 45-mile-per-hour winds because the soil's saturated and it doesn't meet the explicit definition of a severe thunderstorm. So there are a lot of nuances there. But strictly from a forecasting point of view, last time I checked, the atmosphere, the physics of the atmosphere apply in the southeast the same in the plains. But you have different ingredient sets. In the plains, sometimes it's the forecast question could be, am I going to get the moisture back in time? Whereas in the southeast, it can be the moisture's here. The forecast challenge is, am I going to get discrete versus a squall line? So in that regards, the meteorology is the same, but the forecast challenge you have to answer is different depending on your location. And then buttressing all of that is the communication aspect.
All right. Works for me. I believe Scotty had a viewer question, and then we'll wrap up everything here as we get close to 9, at 9,
okay.
Around it.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick.
Scotty, we can't hear you very well.
Hear me now?
I can handle the viewer question if you'd like me to. And so we had a question come in from Craig asking kind of what the process is for a PDS watch versus a regular watch.
It's a really good question. At the end of the day, the decision to go particularly dangerous situation is not made in a vacuum, but it is the forecaster's discretion. We have guidelines for things that we want to see in terms of the environment and the expectations, but at the end of the day, it's the forecaster's decision to go. Now, if we are going PDS, particularly dangerous situation, it implies that we are expecting high confidence of large tornadoes, possibly violent tornadoes. And so correspondingly, if we're going to designate a watch as a particularly dangerous situation watch, the probabilities are locked in to be the high, in the high range. I don't know the exact option values, but you cannot say there's a 10% chance of SIGTORs and go PDS. The software won't let you do that. So in that regards, that's how the probabilities and the decision to go PDS work together. Additionally, I say that it's the forecaster, it's the lead forecaster's decision, but in reality, every watch we're coordinating with the local field offices, and it's a group decision. The field offices provide their input. So at the end of the day, the lead forecaster has to make the decision, but he's not making it alone. SBC is giving his input or their input to the lead forecaster. The field gives their input, and I'm not aware of a situation where it was not a consensus decision to go with the PDS nomenclature.
Patrick, my question is, and I hope you guys can hear me a little bit better. You know, we've been a few years now into the new categories, the marginal, slight, moderate, enhanced, high. How has that went over with you guys? You know, you've had a couple of years now to stew upon it. Is there any changes in the future? Are you guys content with it?
Okay.
What's the process there?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked that. So I'll give you a little bit. I'll quickly go through some backstory into how this all came to be. When the Storm Prediction Center first started doing categories, we had 3: slight, moderate, and high. And our forecasts were geared towards other meteorologists. And as long as we were consistent in how we defined things and we were just talking to other meteorologists, it was easy to say a slight risk means this, a moderate risk means that, a high risk means this. We could all be on the same page, because we knew what it meant, because we understood the meteorology that was going into it. As the public became more consumed our forecasts more, and they're like, well, slight risk doesn't mean that. I'm confused. They don't necessarily understand the backstory there. And so we wanted to provide additional information of those forecasts. Okay, let me actually clarify and say, so the historical, how the slight, moderate, and high came to be. Emergency managers eventually became users of those. And so the emergency managers developed, a lot of emergency managers developed procedures where if we're in a moderate risk, this is what we need to do. And so moderate risk or higher became triggers for emergency management actions. So when we decided that we wanted to add the additional categories to convey the additional information, some of the additional information that's in the probabilities that's always been there, but now move that so it's visible in the categories, we were stuck with the conundrum of how do we come up with new category names without touching the slight, moderate, and high, because the emergency management community has come to rely on the thresholds of slight, moderate, and high. So we did some surveys, and we came up with what the best words that we thought we could come up with that fit in the progression of slight, moderate, and high, knowing that slight, moderate, and high were not the best possible choices. And again, we did this because we wanted to prevent the confusion from our partners who were already aware of what our forecasts meant. So, but we knew that we didn't like the name slight, moderate, and high, and we knew that we eventually wanted to change it. So we also added numbers to our categories. Marginal is a 1, slight is a 2, enhanced is a 3, moderate is a 4, and high is a 5. So now that we've added numbers also to the categories, we're working with emergency managers and others to not just key on the words, but also pay attention to the colors and the numbers. And as people begin to develop familiarity and become comfortable with the numbers, then we can go back and change the names without changing the meaning, because even if we change moderate to snuffleupagus, you would still know that the number 4 meant the old moderate, and so you can make those connections. So we are not opposed to changing the names, as I mentioned. I would not be surprised if in the next few years that there are some name changes. We're open to working with the social scientists. The one thing that we want to do is we want to avoid changing the names frequently. So we want to work with social scientists to make sure that if we change the names, we get them about as right as we possibly could. And so that will take some time and that will take some work, but we are open to it and we're looking forward to it.
I can't wait till we start issuing snuffleupagus at risk. That's going to be great.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, there was the old Department of Homeland Security color-coded system. I think it was like blue, green. And I always remember that somebody had mapped those into the Sesame Street colors. And so red was Elmo, yellow was Big Bird. And so we'd always say, it's a Big Bird alert.
Well, now you're going to have people on Twitter saying the SPC is trying to draw a big bird on their outlooks and everything like that. So
I look forward to it.
All right, Patrick, we really appreciate you joining us tonight and taking some time out of your schedule. Let people know where they can follow you on Twitter or get in touch with you guys, the SPC, if they have a question maybe that wasn't answered tonight or just want to see some of your products.
Sure. You can contact me directly at SPC at my first last name, so patrick.marsh at noaa.gov. You can follow me on Twitter at pmarshwx. You can follow the Storm Prediction Center on Twitter at NWSSPC. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/ I think it's NWSSPC. We just changed it recently, and I think that's what we changed to. So send me an email, send me a tweet. We're incredibly busy. I promise you that I will read your email and I will respond to it as soon as I can. And if you haven't heard from me in a couple of weeks, feel free to ping me again. But I get a lot of email, and so it may take a day or two before I can get back to you. But I promise you, I am reading it and I'm not ignoring you.
And that is the right Facebook link. I just went and checked it, so that's the right one.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you again for joining us. I think we've got one little area of business to take care of here. James and Eric have a little demonstration they want to do on a new app that we're working with now, right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think James is going to do some screen sharing, and I'll talk about it a little bit. So one of the things that I also do on the side, part of memphisweather.net, and have expanded this to a national audience, is a mobile application that will provide your severe weather watches and warnings, similar to several other apps that are out there that will alert you to severe weather as it occurs. And I call that Stormwatch Plus, and it is on the market for iOS right now. We are looking to we're working on some back-end redevelopment to be able to expand that to first hit Android and then potentially some web uses down the road as well. The Carolina Weather Group here has decided to sign on as an affiliate, basically an affiliate marketer for the app. And so I'm glad to take a few minutes tonight and kind of show our users through, or our viewers through, how to use that. And hopefully some of them will be able to download that and make some use of it. It is a national app, so wherever you're following us from or wherever you're watching from, you'll be able to get the information. And we have things from the SPC getting pushed straight to your phone from the local weather service offices and so forth. So I'll ask James to go ahead and Shay, if you would pin up the screen share for me, please. And James is going to launch the app there from iOS. And basically what this gives you is a lot of good basic weather information. But one of the nice things about this app and the way that I designed this is that I like to leverage the good men and women out at all of the local weather service offices across the country to provide the forecast. And a lot of the national apps do not do that. They use their own proprietary models and so forth. And this app actually uses the pinpoint forecasts that come from the local weather service offices. So you're getting your local spin on the weather and the forecast from right there where you live. What James is showing here is the front screen. When you open it up, it'll show your current location and some current conditions and stuff. He's showing the forecast here, and any one of those, you can tap on one of those forecast periods and get the details. Basically, your point forecast for the location that you've got programmed in there, or your current location when it first opens up. Also on that current page there, he doesn't have to show it right now, but there's a change button at the top, and basically you can go to anywhere else in the country and put in a new location, and it will take you to that location, give you the radar, you get your current conditions and your forecast. And all of this portion of the app is free, so it is a free download to get your basic weather information, the radar, the current conditions, and the forecast. There's also down near the bottom of the screen there, we've got a play button, so you can certainly loop that radar there. And then below that is a layers button as well. It's going to go through the playback there as it does it. Several other layers you can add. There's a satellite view on there. You can turn on watches and warnings for your area as a layer. Storm tracks, and also the outlooks that we've been talking about from the Storm Prediction Center, days 1, 2, and 3. You can have as an overlay on the app, so you could put the clouds on there as well as the Storm Prediction Center outlook and your radar, merge them all as separate layers there, and kind of see exactly what it looks like. pan and zoom around the whole United States. So that's that. All of that information is free to you just with the download. A couple other things that you get for free. The second button down at the bottom is a safety tips button. So we wanted to make sure that we get how you should respond to severe weather in your area without any charge, of course. And so there's video form as well as text form that describes the different types of products and how you should respond in those different severe weather instances. Also at the very far right, there's an info tab, and that'll get you to customer support, things like FAQs. You can get straight to the Facebook and Twitter feeds for Stormwatch Plus. All of that is available on the info tab. The bread and butter of this app, though, is the push alerts that come with it. And there's a Stormwatch Plus button at the bottom. If you haven't activated this, then you will get a screen that describes the process of what the product is. And basically, it's like a NOAA weather radio on your phone, on your pocket, with a lot of customizations that can be done to that. And so once you've activated that, and that is the portion of the app that there is a charge for, currently is $8.99, which is a one-time fee. It's not monthly, it's not yearly, it's just a one-time fee. And that's about roughly a third to the fourth of a cost of a NOAA weather radio. And you can program multiple locations. You can have the app follow you. So for example, he's got locations plugged in for Charlotte and Williamport there. Those locations are turned on, so he would be getting alerts in the case that any are issued for those areas. The Stormwatch Plus en route that's right in the middle there is kind of a follow me type of capability. And so if you're traveling across the country and you're driving into counties or places you don't even know the county name or what to watch out for, if you turn that on, it's basically going to follow you. And as you drive into a severe thunderstorm warning, you will get the alert as soon as you drive into it or as you move back out of it. And so you don't really even have to know exactly where you are. You just see a dark cloud ahead of you that you're driving towards. If this is on, it's going to tell you whether or not a warning is out on that cell. So you can add up to 3 static locations. You can have it follow you with that follow me portion. The en route, and then farther down there, you've got a customization that's available for the different types of alerts. So I'm going to have you scroll down there and hit customize my alerts. And as you see, there are many different types of weather that you can get alerted for. So some people only want to know about tornado warnings and don't want to be bothered with any of the other types of alerts. You can do that with this. If you want the whole gamut, you can do that. So there's flood types, there's winter weather types. As you scroll through, you'll see severe weather, thunderstorms and tornado warnings. Also have tropical on here. So you folks out there in the Carolinas, you can get your hurricane watches and warnings, tropical storm. We won't have typhoons here in the U.S., but it does work where typhoon watches are issued as well. And then some of the inland things, and you notice we've also added the newest product from the National Hurricane Center, the storm surge watch and warnings. Those are already built into the app as well. So you just choose the types of alerts you're interested in, and you will only get alerts for those. A couple of comments on the alerts. Almost all of those will use whatever your default notification sound is for your app. There are 2 exceptions. That is the severe thunderstorm warning and the tornado warning. The default sounds for those are going to be the annoying sound that comes on the radio when you're driving along and a tornado warning is issued that sounds like a duck is being choked or something like that. It's the EAS audio, and it is a wake me up type of alert. So if you have this set at night, it will wake you up in the middle of the night, but only for tornado warnings or severe thunderstorm warnings if you have those on. So you can rest assured that you would get those also in the middle of the night. So that's kind of a rundown of what's in the app. Again, it's $8.99 one-time fee to get the upgrade there for the alerting capability. Everything else that you saw in the app is free. And the way that we have this set up from that screen right there, once you have gone in and made that purchase, if you heard about it here on the Carolina Weather Group, you would go down there to enter referral code and type in Carolina and submit that. It doesn't change the price for you, but it gives some credit back to the Carolina Weather Group for them being a part of the affiliate network. So we're glad to be able to use various entities across the country that have a good user base, that are trusted sources in their local area, to make sure that they get the word out about Stormwatch Plus. So we appreciate all of you that go and check that out. Feel free to go download it for free, and then take a look at what Stormwatch Plus does, and hopefully you'll be interested in in signing up for that as well. We really really do appreciate that, and that's kind of what that app provides. So if you want more information on it, you can also go onto the web. Stormwatchplus.com is the website. The page for the Carolina Weather Group is just stormwatchplus.com/Carolina. And you can get all the information straight from the Carolina Weather Group right there on the web. So appreciate all of you that are checking that out, and thanks a lot to the group here for coming on board and getting this word out to folks. It's definitely something that we need more people to have. Everybody's got their phone in their pocket these days, and don't necessarily have access to the severe weather information if they're in front of their television or at home where their weather radio is. So definitely is a way to go for getting severe weather information. And of course, when the watches and warnings that are issued are all by Latin law. So if you are inside the severe thunderstorm warning within a block within it, you're going to get the warning. If you're a block outside it, you won't get the warning. So it uses strictly those polygons now that the National Weather Service issues for those alerts. And I have literally seen them come that close. Somebody says, I didn't get an alert, and I asked for their location. I look up the warning, and I said, you were 2 blocks outside of it. You're right. You didn't get the alert. That's the way it was designed.
And
so,
Eric, let me ask you
I appreciate
again,
that. And
that referral code, Carolina, any cap sensitivity to that?
It'll work either way. So all lowercase is fine. If you put capital C, it's going to work there as well. And again, the website with all the details is stormwatchplus.com/Carolina, and you can download it. There's a link to the iTunes right from there to be able to download it.
All righty, cool. Thank you, Eric and James, for sharing everything. We appreciate that. Next week, we have the award-winning group of Nashville Weather, the Twitter account. They won an award at last year's NWA awards banquet. If you guys have not followed them on Twitter and you live in the Nashville area, they are an excellent follow, a great source of information for Nashville, and we're excited to have them joining us next week to talk a little bit about what they do and weather in the Nashville area. We've got a couple more shows coming up after that: weather rate, disaster zone reporting, and then we're going to dabble in precipitation probability once again, and probably hate ourselves for doing that one again as we get into the later portion of August into September. So if you want to watch this at a later time, we are, of course, on iTunes and Google Play and YouTube. If you have some friends you think may be interested in the show, send them a link. Let them take a listen. This one was a great one. We've got plenty of stuff from previous years, and we'd love to have you check us out and have your friends check us out as well. So with that, we'll wrap up tonight's show, and we hope to see you next week.